Before we dive into today's message, I just need to take a second and celebrate something that is very moving to me, something that every morning has been connecting with my heart. We are heading into week 3 of our follow journey together. Over 1,700 people said yes and opted in, and that moves me deeply. And also 200 children and some adults also using the coloring book to follow along topically with what we are looking at together. Intentional time with Jesus. This is just absolutely powerful. And again, thinking about all of these people next on Monday, when you jump back in, will you just remember to pray for those that are part of your church family, that God will use this intentional time in each of our lives as we journal and reflect and pray and make space for Jesus. I know he will do big things in our lives. Now, I know some of you might be a little bit behind, or maybe you have no idea what we're talking about, but we have a devotional guide that we've written, and we've been working through it together. There's still some available, and we'd love for you to jump in. If you're getting behind, it's okay. Don't panic. Just stay involved. Don't give up. Keep going. Re-engage. It's not about perfection. It's about proximity. Now, let me say that one more time. It's not about perfection. It's about proximity. This is about your pursuit of God and about staying close to Jesus. And here's why that's so important, because that's where transformation happens. When we stay close to our Jesus, he works in our lives. When we position ourselves within eyesight and earshot of what he wants to be saying to us, that's where change happens. And while our proximity to Jesus looks different than some of the stories that we read, please don't think that it's not equally as powerful and real and life-changing when you and I draw near to him today. So I read a quote this week that really captured my attention, and this is what it says: "We're distracting ourselves into spiritual oblivion." And here's what's personally haunting to me. That distraction doesn't even seem dangerous anymore. It just feels normal. Am I the only one? And we need to talk about that. We need to address that. So a few years ago, I heard a story. There's a pastor. His name is John Ortberg. Some of you maybe have heard of John Ortberg. He's an author, a writer. He has a great podcast that I listen to with regularity. Super great guy. Actually is friends with Pastor Eric on our team. And he was pastoring and leading at one of the largest churches in America. It was growing like crazy, and his life was super full. Lots happening and very, very busy. And he noticed that there was something happening in the busyness that was kind of taking his heart and his soul away from connection with the Lord. And so he decided that he would call his spiritual mentor, and you hear us mention his name often. His name is Dallas Willard. And Dallas was a professor at USC at the time, and he has been and still continues to be, even after his death, one of the foremost voices in the area of spiritual formation. So he called him, and John said to Dallas, this is what's going on, described his situation, and I am concerned because I want to be the me that I want to be, and I could use some help to know what it is that I need to do. And if you've heard the stories of Dallas Willard, you know he's an extremely thoughtful person, kind of like E.F. Hutton. You know, you want to pay close attention when he does speak. When you read his books, you have to go very slow because they're so full of rich content. And so John describes the situation as being awkwardly silent for a while. And then eventually Dallas, in his kind of deep voice that he had, said, "John, you need to ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life." And when John describes the situation, he said he quickly wrote in his journal, "Ruthlessly eliminate hurry from my life." And then he said, "Okay, what else?" And there was a super long pause. And Dallas said, "John, that's it." And this is what we're trying to do in this series together, to create some space to be with Jesus, to be present, to listen, and to notice our God at work in our lives. Henry Nouwen, a psychologist and a spiritual writer who literally spent the bulk of his life trying to help people connect their lives, their inner world to God's love, said this: "Without solitude, it is virtually impossible to live a spiritual life." We need to pay attention to this because, friends, without stillness, without space, and without intentionality, our souls will slowly starve while our schedules get increasingly more full and busy. And that brings us to where we're headed today. How do we fight this? How do we fight it? If everything around us is forming us into hurried, frenzied, distracted people, how do we do this differently? What would it take this week for you and I to be intentional, to be within eyesight of what he wants to say to us, in earshot of what he wants to whisper? The psalmist wrote this in Psalm 46, verse 10, "Be still and know that I am God." You see, following Jesus requires something that the world you and I live in will fight against 100% of the time. And that's what this series is about. That's what our follow guides are about. Following Jesus requires proximity. You must make space for him, close enough to see his steps and quiet enough to hear his whispers. Proximity to Jesus changes us. Following from a distance just doesn't work. Jesus didn't call you to just believe. He called you to follow, to walk with him. And, Mom was right, wasn't she? My mom used to put it this way: Dougie, you're going to get to be like the people you hang out with. And then usually they would say something like birds of a feather. Okay, I need your help. Here's why I need your help. Like last week, I was in Atlanta and I spoke at Pastor Keith's church. And some of you know Pastor Keith because he's spoken here a lot. It's slowly becoming a favorite place to preach. And here's why. There's a lot of feedback. There's a lot of feedback. As a matter of fact, the guy in the keys never left the platform last week. So every time I got a little fired up and said something good, he'd be like, like that. It was awesome, man. I had everybody talking back to me, and I really knew they weren't sleeping. They were dialed in. So are you dialed in with me? Okay, that's all right. All right. Yeah, like we're just too white around here, I think. It's time for us to get a little more feedback. I can't wait to send this clip of this to Keith. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be awesome. We can learn a few things. But I need some feedback today because this is so true. And I'm going to need your help as we go through this. So if we're not intentional, the pace of life will pull us out of range. And you can't see Jesus's steps in your life when your eyes are glued to everything else. And you will not hear his whisper when our lives are filled with noise or when you're the one that's always talking. Yeah. Again, what we're talking about and what we have been unpacking together during this series, it's just so stinking simple and yet so hard. These are not complicated things. They're simple. But it requires something of us. And I promise you that even in the hustle of doing ministry and doing good things for God, your pastor can also very easily find himself disconnected from the one I talk about. What if the most important invitation of Jesus, the one that changes everything, is when he says to us, "Come follow me"? So I want to take you to a passage of scripture, if you have your Bibles, in Matthew chapter 4. In Matthew chapter 4, and we're going to look starting in verse 18. And this section is subtitled in my Bible, "The First Disciples." So I want to read to you what happened. This is one of the first times that Jesus says to anyone, "Come follow me." And so it says this in verse 18, "One day Jesus was walking along the shore of the Sea of Galilee. He saw two brothers, Simon, also called Peter," say Peter, you need to remember that, "and Andrew throwing a net into the water, for they fished for a living." Verse 19, Jesus called out to them, "Come follow me, and I will show you how to fish for people." Verse 20, and they left their nets at once, say at once, and followed him. I think it's awesome that Jesus didn't walk up to these dudes and give them a lecture. He didn't give them a theology class, and he for sure did not give them a list of rules to follow. He just simply said this, "Guys, follow me." Why? Why would Jesus say that? It's an invitation to walk with him, to stay within eyesight and earshot, because he also knows that proximity to him is the game changer. It's what forms us. It's what changes us. So let's go back to verse 20. I hope it caught your attention because it did me. It still does. And they left their nets at once and followed him. When you first read that, that seems horribly irresponsible. Does it not? You read that, you're like, are you kidding me? In literally 3 verses, the guys dropped the nets and followed Jesus. That seems crazy to me. It feels unrealistic. Now, who in the world would do that? Now, if you're new to Jesus and new to reading the Bible, let me just share with you something you need to know, and we all need to be reminded. Many of these stories of Jesus's life are repeated in each of the Gospels. Some don't have all of the stories, some pick and choose others, but from unique perspective of the writer, we get to learn more details of the stories, often in each of the different Gospels. And in this particular story, now I want you to turn to Luke chapter 5. Luke chapter 5, I love that Luke gives us more info, and the details that Luke's Gospels show us are going to help us to see how proximity to Jesus makes obedience plausible. So let me show it to you. In Luke chapter 5, verse 1, Luke's now going to elaborate on more details surrounding this story. And it says this: one day, as Jesus was preaching on the shore of the Sea of Galilee, great crowds pressed in on him to listen to the word of God. And I just love this scene. We just see Jesus being Jesus. Jesus is doing what Jesus does. The crowds are following him, and he finds himself on this beach, and the crowds are pressing in because they want to hear what Jesus is saying, practically backing him up into the water. And because he's Jesus, he doesn't see this as a problem. He sees this as an opportunity, and he likely just wanted to be heard better, so he begins to use the water as a natural amplifier, kind of like a built-in sound system. The water becomes his stage. But then Luke tells us something very interesting, and this is where Peter kind of comes into the story. Look at verse 2. He, speaking of Jesus, noticed 2 empty boats at the water's edge, for the fishermen had left them and were washing their nets. Stepping into one of the boats, Jesus asked Simon, its owner, to push it out into the water. So he sat in the boat and taught the crowds from there. Okay, here's what I want you to see today as we walk through this story together. Spiritual formation takes time. When you get near Jesus, that's when things begin. But I want you to see in Peter's life that he starts to stack small yeses, one after another, and this is what begins to change Peter's life. But what I don't want you to miss is this: the same is true for you. As you say yes to getting close to Jesus, he's going to speak to you. He's going to challenge you. He's going to tap you on the shoulder. He's going to confirm things in you. He's going to speak things into you. And you, just like Peter, need to start stacking some small yeses in your walk with Jesus. And as you stack those small yeses, you see that's when this formation that we've been talking about starts to happen. So it's important. Now, here's where I need your help. We're gonna do this together. I need you to say 2 words out loud, and the words are "my boat." Okay, good. You're with me. I'm gonna count to 3, and let's give it "my boat" like they do in Atlanta. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Oh, gosh, yeah, I love it already. Jesus isn't asking for perfection in Peter's life. He asked for his boat. All he said is, "Can I borrow your boat?" Why? Because Jesus knows that proximity changes everything. Now, I have a really, really hard time believing that this is a random boat selection. I don't see it that way. There's no way that this is random. I don't think the trip to the shoreline was exclusively about Jesus teaching to the crowds that day. I think they were following him, and he knew that it was an opportunity to teach. But I think ultimately this was about moving towards Peter. He chose that boat on purpose, and he stepped literally into Peter's world. And let's be honest. Let me just ask, anyone have a boat? Just raise your hand if you have a boat, because I don't need to have a boat if you have a boat, right? I'm just kidding, kind of. But if some random person walks up to your boat and walks on uninvited, what are you going to do? You're going to get them off your boat. You're going to punch them in the throat and ask them, what in the world are you doing on my boat? But it's interesting that that didn't happen here. But for sure, this was a little bit unique. You don't walk onto someone's boat unless you're uninvited or you're Jesus. Listen to me. The choice to walk on this boat wasn't coincidental. It was providential. It was as though Jesus was saying, bro, I'm stepping into your world, into your livelihood, into your space, and into your story. In his culture, a man's boat represented his identity and his security. It was literally the way that he made his living. And this wasn't just any boat. Don't let this be lost on you. Because this Peter that we're talking about just a few chapters later is the very same Peter that Jesus would call the rock that he would build his church upon. That is not a random boat selection, friends. Please don't miss this. Remember, it all started because now Peter is within eyesight and earshot of Jesus. That's how it began. And you know what I love about this? Jesus says to him, let's just use your boat. Will you push out a little bit further? And Peter's in the boat, right? I'd like to tell you this. He's in the spit zone of Jesus' teaching, just like all of you right here. That's the spit zone. That's right there, right close. And that's how it began, not with a pursuit of religion, not with a list of rules, just a moment of closeness to Jesus. And that's where it begins for you and I too. Not with trying to figure everything out. Friends, just get closer to Jesus. And what I love about this story is Jesus didn't meet Peter in the temple. He literally met him on the job site. Peter was smelling like a fisherman. He was probably tired. And raise your hand if you ever had a bad day at work, because that's what happened to Peter. His job is catching fish and he didn't catch fish. So he's ever been mad on the way home from work? I think Peter was mad that day too. And when Jesus stepped into Peter's boat, he literally stepped into the center of his life. Why? Because of proximity. What started with a borrowed platform to preach a message became the stage for Peter's calling. And notice this, Jesus also didn't ask Peter to go get all cleaned up. He probably smelled a lot like a fisherman. You know why? He was a fisherman. He probably stank bad. It wasn't like Jesus said, hey, bro, I'd like to use your boat. Would you go take a shower? Would you go get all cleaned up first before you hang out with me? Someone needs to hear this today, because that's not what he's saying to you either. You might feel like you got a lot of stink on you and life has been hard. And when you look at your past, you're like, I'm so unqualified. But I need you to know Jesus wants to step into your boat too. He wants to step into your world, into the center of your life. And he is not telling you to get it all cleaned up first. He's saying proximity will change you. We'll get there. Just come hang out with me. And when you hang out with me, this will change your life. He meets you right where you are in your boat, knee deep in your normal life. And that, friends, is what we call grace. This is where we are formed by the grace of God. And the invitation isn't get it together. It's simply, can I borrow your boat? And what Jesus was saying here to Peter is this: can I have a place in your ordinary life? Just like he's saying to you, friend, can I please have a place in your ordinary life? And I don't want you to miss this again. Peter's journey of faith began with a small yes, and the same is true for you, and the same is true for me. His first act of faith wasn't leaving everything. It was just saying yes to being near to Jesus, like we're doing during this series together. So let's keep going. Remember, Peter's in the spit zone of Jesus' teaching. And in verse 4, it says this: when Jesus had finished speaking, he said to Simon, now go out where it's deeper and let down your nets to catch some fish. Again, remember, we're stacking small yeses here. And this next word to describe this next yes is the word beyond. No, now go out where it's deeper, Jesus says, because Jesus will always call us to go beyond where we are comfortable. That is not reckless. That is relational. Because when you're uncomfortable, you can get closer to him. In that next small step of trust, Jesus says, I'm right here. Now, I like to imagine, I think it's just this mind of mine that I have, that Peter, who was, what did he do for a living? A fisherman, would have said to Jesus when he says, hey, why don't we get those nets you've just cleaned up and fixed up and put back together for the next day? Why don't you go get those and let's push out into deeper water again? And I imagine Peter's thinking, bro, I know where you're from and I know what you do. My friend, you are a carpenter. I am a fisherman. We just fished all day and the fish were not there. And this is the wrong time of day to fish. The fish are going deeper. This isn't going to work. This is all the things that Peter's thinking in his mind. But what I need you to see is what he said. He's stacking some yeses together. Peter says something so powerful in verse 5. Master, Simon replied, we worked hard all last night and didn't catch a thing. Say these next 5 words with me. But if you say so, I'll let the nets down again. Do you see that next little yes that was stacked upon the other 2? Formation doesn't happen all at once. This word now is because. And this one we also must never forget, because that sentence is discipleship in 5 words. Because if you say so. Trust before proof. Stay close enough to hear the invitation. Because if we get close enough and we get quiet enough, we will sense his promptings, and that's when we stack the next yes. If you say so. If you say so, I will do it. And saying yes, even when it doesn't make sense, it's obedience before understanding, and it's trusting before knowing. Peter's next simple, small act of obedience intersected with Jesus' faithfulness, and it changed something in him. Again, one small yes after another, after another, after another. The same is true for you and me. Look at verse 6. And this time their nets were so full of fish, they began to tear. A shout for help brought their partners in the other boat, and soon their boats were filled with fish and on the verge of sinking. And I often will say this, if you're new to Plum Creek, like, I sure hope when we get to heaven and spend eternity together that there's like a heavenly IMAX with, a heavenly Dolby surround sound or whatever. It'll probably be better than all of that. And we get to watch this story. And I would love it if we get to ask questions of Peter after we get to see the story. He'll probably be crying as he tells us what this was all about. Being within eyesight and earshot of Jesus changes us one yes at a time. And check it out now. This is Peter's moment. Look at verse 8. He's changed now. When Simon Peter realized what had happened, he fell to his knees before Jesus and said, "Oh Lord, please leave me. I am such a sinful man." Let me stop and remind you, they're just fishing. But when you and I invite Jesus into our everyday, there will be a moment where when you see him for who he is, and you will feel just like Peter did. Look at verse 9. For he was awestruck by the number of fish they had caught, and the others, as were the others that were with them. He drops to his knees and just says, "Lord, I need your forgiveness. I'm a sinful man." Peter's proximity to Jesus begins to change him. He's been within eyesight and earshot of him now. And now, in this moment, he sees Jesus for who he is. And also, Jesus sees Peter and has for a long time for who he really is. And listen to me, Jesus does not back away because of his imperfections. He leans even closer. Again, he doesn't say, oh yeah, Peter, you are a mess. I think I got the wrong guy. Can you paddle me back to shore? I'm going to go find a fisherman that's got it a little more cleaned up than you. That is not what Jesus says in this moment. Not even close. He leans in closer. Look at verse 10 and says, "Don't be afraid. From now on, you'll be fishing for people." Translation, Jesus is saying, I know who you are, Peter. And I still choose to be close to you. He says, Peter, I know who you think you are. And I know you're wrong because I know who you are. Stay close to me. Keep stacking those yeses and watch what I will do. This invitation to be with Jesus isn't revoked by our imperfections, friends. It's actually reinforced by them. You see, grace doesn't excuse sin. It meets us in our sin right where we are and transforms us into who we were meant to be. And here's what we could oftentimes forget, or what could be overlooked. Now that we know the story, right? We know the story. We know more details. This wasn't 3 verses, drop the net and walk with Jesus. It was a whole series of events and a whole series of small yeses that get him to this point. And now, as Paul Harvey would say, the rest of the story, right? Verse 11, and as soon as they had landed, they left everything and followed Jesus. This is the 4th of the yeses that he's been stacking with Jesus in this moment. And the 4th yes is described in this word, belong. They left everything and they followed. Peter had seen enough. He had now experienced enough of Jesus to trust him with everything. Formation is not about trying harder. It's about staying closer. And this, my friends, is exactly why you are on this journey with us that we call Follow. This is our mission, to challenge you, to help you, to provide resources and help facilitate relationships that will keep you in close proximity to your Jesus. Now, every once in a while, I think it's important. Like, you might be thinking with me right now here today, like, okay, Doug, for real, like, what happens then? If I keep stacking some yeses and I stay in close proximity to Jesus, what is it going to look like? Play it out for me. What is it going to look like? And I don't know all the details, but I can tell you it's going to be similar to Peter's experience. You want to see the end of the game with Peter? Watch this. In Acts chapter 4, verse 13, after years of walking and watching and listening within eyesight and earshot, he has changed. And now he's just got done teaching. And I want you to see in verse 13 of Acts chapter 4, the council was amazed at the boldness of Peter and John, for they could see that they were, say the words with me, ordinary men. Raise your hand if you're an ordinary man or woman. Gives you some hope, doesn't it? What made the difference? Don't you forget it. What made the difference? Being with Jesus. Now watch what happens. Ordinary men with no special training in the scriptures. Don't forget this sentence. They also recognized them as men who had been with Jesus. That's the game changer. That takes you from a fisherman to a fisher of men. That takes you from a place where you feel you're unqualified and underqualified to someone who is used by the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords to make a difference in the world around us. You can always tell when someone's been with Jesus because Jesus' presence leaves a residue on our lives. Formation doesn't happen through striving. It happens through staying close. And Mom was right. You get to be like whomever you hang out with. And friends, I can think of no one else. I would encourage you to hang out with no one else more than you hang out with Jesus. But the problem, as we identified before I really got into my main thoughts today, is this: staying close is hard, isn't it? It's a simple message, and yet so hard. We live in this world that rewards distraction, and the enemy of our soul wants it that way. Do you know why he wants you busy? Do you know why he wants you unconnected from Jesus? Do you know why? Because he knows that that's when you truly become the person God created you to be. So of course, he's going to make life spin fast. And he's going to try and get you to a place where you deprioritize the very thing that matters most. And we all do it. I do it too. But this is how we become the men and women that God created us to be. We get close to Jesus. We start stacking yeses, small yeses in our lives that become significantly impactful. And Dallas Willard said it this: the first and most basic thing that we can and must do is keep God before our minds. This was Peter's journey. And my prayer is that it will be mine and yours as well. And I hope you see today it's less of one giant leap of faith than it was staying close to Jesus and stacking yeses. Little yeses that become big yeses. It started with that small yes. Peter just showed up and he gave Jesus a place in his ordinary life. Could you do that? Yeah. And then Jesus asked him to go beyond. That was the stretch. A nudge to go a little further than felt safe or convenient. The next yes was this because, this understanding of what it truly means to be a disciple, that when we hear his prompts, even when they don't make sense to us, we say yes because it was Jesus that said it. And then we get to this place where we belong. And by this point, Peter had seen enough. So it wasn't a foolish, reckless abandonment. It was a very informed decision. And he said yes to not put a little bit of Jesus, remember a couple of weeks ago, into his life, but rather to take his whole life and put it into Jesus. That's the ripple effect of stacking yeses, and each yes draws Peter and you and I closer, and we're reshaped by it. So, friends, please look at me. Don't hear my voice right now. Hear his. Are you staying close? Have you prioritized staying close to Jesus? Are you stacking some small yeses in your life, or have you been saying no? Where is it that you know for sure he's already spoken to you? Start stacking some yeses. And if you're here today and you think it's about perfection, please look at the story. It has nothing to do with perfection. Not at all. You are not disqualified. He loves you. And he wants to be close to you. And when you stack that yes and decide to prioritize your life around being close to this Jesus, it will change you. It will change you forever. So maybe we need to ask, what is it that's been clouding my field of vision in the priority of my life to be close to Jesus? Friends, listen to me. There is nothing more important than doing this. What voices have got louder than his in your life? I mean, for real. Why? Why would you follow him at a distance? Get close. Watch what happens. So let's not just put a little Jesus in our life. Let's put our whole life into Jesus, our whole day. How do we do it? You know what our student ministry did? They got some alarm clocks with the logo from the student ministry for the students. You know why? So they would put their phones far away. Not even keep their phone in their room. And I know what you're thinking. Well, how will I get up in the morning? The same way we used to before we had phones. Right? I think one of the best purchases you could make today is an old school alarm clock. Put your phone in a different room. Let that alarm go off. And instead of your phone being the first thing you grab, what if Jesus was? How would that impact your life? You're not distracted. You're dialed in. A simple little yes. And we keep inviting him to be part of our day all throughout the day. And then we're going to spend that 15 or 20 minutes with Jesus in that follow guide. And just don't hurry. This is not an exercise to check the box and move forward. This is a time for you to still your heart, put the distractions away, and ask God to speak to you. Do the exercises. You should see my book. It's so full of writing as I've followed God's prompts in my own life. And then you finish your day with a whispered prayer to Jesus. And let me just say this. If you've fallen behind in your guide, I beg you, please hear me now. Do not get into power mode catch-up time. It's not about doing 12 days in one day. It's okay if you don't finish before we're done with the series. Take your time, work your way through it, inviting God to be part of your day, saying and stacking those small yeses because it's the proximity to him that changes you. So, can you start stacking some yeses? Can you please make a decision to prioritize getting close to this Jesus we're talking about? Because it will change you. Will you bow your heads with me for just a moment? Father, thank you. Thank you for these stories that are so applicable in our lives. And I just ask in this moment, if there's one person, if you've already made this decision, that first decision to say yes to Jesus, will you pray with me right now for someone that can hear my voice, whether in this room or worshiping online in this moment? Lord, we know you're speaking to people to say yes to you. And so will you just keep communicating very clearly? Could we sense deep inside of our gut, in our soul right now, that the Spirit of God is drawing us to this place to say this first yes? And if that's you in your own words, will you just tell him, I know I need to say yes to you. I'm so thankful that we can learn through Peter's story. This is not about me cleaning up my life before I come. It's about getting close enough to you that you with me will clean up this life. So I ask you to forgive me. And now I ask you to be at work in me. With your strength and power, Lord, will you help me to start stacking some yeses? And Lord, I pray that for all of us, that we wouldn't rush through this thing in a hurried fashion, but we would literally allow your presence to change us when we spend time with you. And Lord, will you help all of us to keep stacking some small yeses? And I have this deep sense in my heart, friend, that there might be someone listening to me today who knows with great clarity where God has already spoken to you about something you need to say yes to, but you haven't said yes yet. Maybe he's tapped you on the shoulder about something you know you need to address. Just start stacking some yeses. And just know it's not about you figuring this out. It's not about you doing this on your own. Just ask him to be at work in you. Stay close to your Jesus and watch, my friends, how he will change your life.